Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, Ed Dentzel. I hope everybody had a great weekend. You can find my books at Amazon.com. Do a search for Edward Dentzel there. You can download them to your Kindle in a matter of moments. Unfortunately, they're only in digital form, but people, come on, let's work yourself into the 21st century, okay? You can email me at edwarddentzel@reagan.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Dentzel Domain, all one word, no space in between. You can go to edwarddentzel.com where you can find all of my old Red State Talk Radio shows. You can also find my highlight reel there that's been up for a few months now. It's been getting some nice attention. You can find all of the links that I use for my shows there as well. You can find my shows in the iTunes Store. In the podcast section, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook. And now you can also find the I guess you'd call them the reruns of my shows, not just on my site, but you can find them on SoundCloud and Podbean as well. And I'm going to continue to work on getting as many of the old shows up on there as possible. This weekend, we'll get to the politics in a moment. My dad's team finally lost this weekend. Slippery Rock, they lost to Shepherd. My dad went to the game. My mom and dad went to the game. It was a great atmosphere from what they said. Unfortunately, Slippery Rock could not win the game, lost 28-16, but they ended up being one of the top 8 teams in the country in the NCAA Division II football. So my dad was very excited about that. It was a great season, a great adventure for him and my mom, who went to all but one game this year, I believe. They did not go to the first one where Slippery Rock played up in New Haven, Connecticut, but every other game. So they were all over Pennsylvania, as is usually the case. They follow those teams. That's a big thing that my dad gets into, and he hates missing any of the games. So Slippery Rock lost. So let's get right into the politics of today. Being that today is December 7th, I know there's going to be some memorials today, some dedications. This would be 1941. This would be the 74th anniversary of the bombing of Pearl Harbor by the Japanese. And as I think about it, I wonder, are we ever going to feel about September 11th the way we do about Pearl Harbor? I think it's safe to say that over 14 years after September 11th, we don't feel the same way that we feel about Pearl Harbor. Yes, even though most of us were not around when Pearl Harbor happened, we look at that as an incident, as an attack, but we look at it and say, well, we did the right thing after it happened. That in no time we knew what needed to be done. We didn't know what was exactly going to happen. We didn't know if we were going to win or lose. But we knew that we had to strike back against the Japanese. We knew that there was no way we were going to have some sort of discussion with them, because that would make us look afraid of them. They would continue to take advantage of us. We believed that if we just want to talk to them, who knows what could happen? Who knows what they would want? At the same time, we had our ally England fighting against the Nazis. We could have blown that off too when we tried to. But the Pearl Harbor attack, you got to, just on a side note, Germany, when they heard that Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, they had, did Hitler know about that before it happened? I have to go back and check that. They couldn't have been pleased. Germany had to be ecstatic the United States stayed out of World War II as long as it did. And probably knew once Pearl Harbor got bombed that we were going to jump in with both feet, probably much to Japan's and Germany's demise and Italy's demise. That's exactly what happened. In any case, we look at Pearl Harbor as the beginning of something that, although many men got killed, that in the end, we fixed that. In the end, we didn't just let that go. That we didn't just pose, a token response and tried to just keep Japan off of certain islands, Midway, and the rest of them. That we were going to take the fight to the enemy both in Europe and in the Pacific, and it wasn't going to be done until they gave in. And if they didn't give in, then we were just going to kill all of them. Most people don't realize about World War II. That was really the point. That we would have kept bombing Japan with nuclear weapons and whatever until they gave in. If that meant that the entire Japan, the island of Japan, and all the islands that make up Japan were nothing but craters, that's what we would have done. That's what we would have done. You don't like to think about it that way because we tend to think of ourselves as enlightened in the 21st century. But that's what we were going to do. Same way with Germany. If they hadn't eventually surrendered, we would have completely flattened every city in Europe. And we would have killed every person. There was no way we were going to let up. We let up because they finally gave in and changed their ways. And it made for a safer planet after that. Granted, we did have some other wars, but those other wars can greatly be contrasted with World War II. That we didn't take an all-or-nothing standpoint. Of course, then nuclear weapons getting into the hands of others came into play. But we look at Pearl Harbor as eventually something where the United States showed its excellence. What is it? What did they say? Sports do not build character, they reveal it. That's what World War II did. In the horrible way, and unfortunately, lots of people had to be killed because of that. Do we feel the same way about September 11th, 14 years after? I know I don't. I still see it as a horrible day, and I still don't feel that we've gotten the retribution. Is it revenge? Is this what I don't want to portray it that way. What we've done to this point has not been a total success. Not like World War II, where we took it to the enemy and made sure that the enemy knew not to mess with us anymore. This is not what has happened after September 11th. We've hurt a lot of radical Muslims. We've hurt a lot of terrorists. We've deposed some dictators and everything, but they surely have not learned their lesson. In fact, now, as I stand here doing the show, they probably feel more emboldened today than they ever have since September 11th. And they'll feel more emboldened tomorrow, and they'll feel more emboldened the day after, despite us killing as many as we have. It doesn't matter what the number is if it's not enough. That's what you have to remember. Too many people will say, well, look how many terrorists we've killed already, and it hasn't changed. This isn't the right thing to do. Well, you know what? We killed a lot of Germans and a lot of Japanese for a while. Now, granted, it didn't go on 14 years, which is, once again, another problem. We didn't get to killing, for example, 1,000 Japanese and say, man, these guys just do not give up. Maybe we should do something else. We just had the attitude, we're just going to kill as many as who oppose us. You continue to oppose us, you're going to die. That's just the way it is. You don't oppose us, then we'll let up. Same way with Germany, same way with Italy. And frankly, that's the same way it should have been with Russia after World War II as well. In any case, as like Patton wanted to do, General Patton. But we have not turned the September 11th attack into a victory like we turned the Pearl Harbor. We just haven't. And I think that is this kind of, you just kind of feel it. This kind of depression that is still continues to envelope all of us 14 years later regarding this. I've told you on this show before, I cannot imagine the pain that families wake up with every day, knowing that how their sons and daughters died in these in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. And the job's not done. In fact, it seems for the most part, we've given up on it. We've walked away. We have a president who wants to walk away. And we'll get to him and his speech and everything before this is all over. But I'm just trying to contrast what we've done for the last 14 years to what we did when we were attacked by Japan December 7th, 1941. The results are very different, aren't they? What we did is very different. You got to keep in mind that 14 years after Pearl Harbor, it would have been 1955. Would have already been through the Korean War at that point. I mean, that's how crazy this all is. And it's not because the terrorists are so sophisticated and everything. It's on us. It's not that they're so fierce. It's not that they're so dangerous. It's not anything other than our will to kill them. And our will is not as strong as it was in 1941. Now, granted, in 1955, once again, 14 years later after Pearl Harbor, yes, a lot of people still did think about Pearl Harbor. And there were scars, and men did come back, and they did have post-traumatic stress disorder, although that's not what they called it at the time. It was like shell shock or something like that. And a lot of people did suffer, but it was a win. That means at least something. Well, we have all that, and we still have, 14 years later, a married Muslim couple shooting up a conference center, shooting up people who gave a baby shower for them earlier this year. We're still having stuff like that. Right? Now maybe it is. Maybe the enemy's a little bit different now, and the spread of them is a lot greater than the Japanese and the Germans and all of that. But we're more powerful than ever. Even though we have cut back on the military somewhat, we're still much more powerful now than we were when World War II got started. The ability to be anywhere, anytime is something that the United States can do, and it is the only country in the world that can do that, no matter what the Chinese and the Russians think, what they say they can do. But our goal should be to convert September 11th into the kind of memory that Pearl Harbor is now, where it revealed our character and we actually won. It's revealed September 11th revealed our character. It's just that we haven't won yet. Just haven't. We've misplayed it. Some of it can be put on the Bush administration. A lot of it, of course, can be put at Barack Obama's feet. If you want this to stop, we're going to have to do more. And it's going to be have to be unrestricted. Until that point, I think you're just going to continue to have what we had in San Bernardino last week. That's not what anybody wants to hear. That's obviously not what Barack Obama is selling. You know my attitude toward him and his attitude toward terrorism and terrorists. So this is what you get. Does it make you happy? It doesn't. It does not feel after 14 years that we've converted September 11th into a win. And I don't know if we're ever going to feel like that. Even though it is, I believe it's possible. But 14 years on, no real, to me, your average American can feel that way. That just makes no sense to me whatsoever. And so it may be 74 years. You have to think of it this way. 74 years after September 11th, what would that be? That would be 2075. How are those people going to feel? I'll be long gone. How are those people going to feel about September 11th? They're going to look back at it and see it as a win? Are we eventually going to turn this around? Or all those years later, are they still going to be dealing with terrorism? And kooks and nuts and radical Islam and couples shooting up conference centers and on and on and on. Or at some point between now and then, 2075, will we convert it into a win? I wonder. I think early on, we wanted to convert it into a win back in 2002, 2003. Then things just went wrong, and I don't mean Iraq. I think that something changed. Now, granted, it eventually changed in 2008 when Barack Obama got elected, but it happened well before that. I think it had to do with what we could stomach. I think that we didn't look at the enemy the right way. I wanted to say misrepresented the enemy. Maybe the politicians misrepresented the enemy to us, but we underestimated the enemy. Let's put it that way. No. Didn't have enough people over there. That's why we needed the surge to get it under control. But 14 years later, we've not converted it into a win, unlike what we did. I mean, by 1955, 14 years after Pearl Harbor, Japan and West Germany were our friends. They were allies. They'd seen the error in their ways, and that continues to today, to the point in 1990 where East Germany said, you know what, would really like to be friends with West Germany, and the wall fell. Different times, maybe. Different enemy. Different environment. But the point is still that you have to convert these attacks into wins. And if you can't do that as a country, you're just not the same. You're just not. And it is a scar on us that we haven't been able to do that. That we haven't made September 11th feel like Pearl Harbor yet. I know, a lot of pain associated with Pearl Harbor. A lot of it. A lot of those men, I know they're dying every day who were there. They're really, really old now. But those who remember it, they have the pain, they remember it, they can remember what happened, and so there's pain for them. But as a country, we look at it as something where the United States stepped up and was willing to bear any burden to defeat the enemy. It's just not who we are now. In fact, I remember even well before I ever started the show, going back to, when I first started doing political shows on the internet, that one of the problems I think that we had once again going back to the Bush years, was that we made it too convenient for people in the United States. That the administration wanted to portray, okay, we can be having this war over there, but everybody can be living well in the United States. And I think, frankly, that's a little bit where the housing bubble came from, because people were prospering, kind of took people's, we're fighting this war over there, and we're doing this, we're fighting this terrorist, we're in Iraq and Afghanistan, and look, at the same time, we can have this great economy. Well, maybe what should have been done was that maybe the United States should have suffered a little bit, just like the men and women going overseas should have suffered. And said, you know what? We're going to be like this until we defeat the enemy. And you know what people would have said? They would have said, you know what? We got to get this done as fast as possible. What are you doing not bombing here, not bombing there, and not doing this and not doing that? We want our economy back. Let's kill those guys. Let's wipe them all out so we can get back to the good old days of the 90s. I think there's something to that. I think there's really something to that now that hindsight's 20/20. Because during World War II, rationing, cutting back, because it's one of those things. You either feel that the enemy is a threat to your country, or you don't. Right? You either do or you don't. Especially when it's attacked you on your home soil. And remember, Hawaii wasn't even a state at that point. Didn't become a state till 1959. So we did all that for the attack on a naval base in a territory, not a state. Meanwhile, 2001, our largest city gets attacked in one of our states. And we go at it, but it's hard now to say that we went at it full force. That we wanted to, it was like we wanted to inconvenience people in the United States as little as possible. And having been in my 30s at the time, I can tell you that's the truth. Maybe you don't think about it at the time that way, but you can look back. I look back at it now and say, that does seem a little strange now. I mean, granted, it's 2015 and we're still having a terrorist attack in the United States and still getting people killed in Paris, and we have this ISIS group in the Middle East. You looking back at those mid-2000s does look a little strange now. I think everybody back then thought, well, this will be over by 2015. No matter who gets elected in 2008. That's not the way it went. It could be we as the average Americans in the early 2000s just didn't suffer enough. And really feel it. Whereas we're living good, everybody's housing prices are going up, unemployment rate's going down. Of course, most of it was fake. We now know that. We know that now. Oh, and we're like, oh yeah, you can fight that war over there. Now, granted, for the military families, I know that it was something that's much different. But for anybody who didn't have anybody over there, they're thinking, well, this is all great. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. We can fight that war over there. We're killing terrorists. We can have this great economy. Well, if this is the way it's going to be, they can just fight those terrorists forever. Which isn't exactly, I think, the right attitude. I mean, if you're fighting a war forever, maybe you're doing it wrong. So September 11th is not Pearl Harbor yet. We can't look back at it and say, man, we really rose up there and defeated the enemy and got back to living the American lifestyle. No, we got back to living the American lifestyle almost a little too quickly after September 11th. And I think that cost us. So I'm not sure if, back then, early 1940s, everybody had to sacrifice to beat the enemy. They took no risks. There was none of this. It's going to be the best of times in the United States, but the worst of times for the soldiers over there in Europe and in the Pacific. It was like everybody's going to have to suffer for this. In the end, though, we're all going to be better off, and we were. We're not all better off now. In fact, now more than ever, as you can see by gun sales and other things, Americans believe now more than ever, and rightfully so, that something has gone wrong with this fight against the terrorists. Something has gone wrong. And I think most conservatives, I think all conservatives, most Republicans, and even some Democrats now are pointing at Barack Obama as being the main instigator of this problem. But I'm here to tell you, it probably started before that. I mean, he made it exponentially worse, but it probably started in the Bush years. With this attitude that we can live here like a war is not even going on. You can prosper, you can send your kids to college, your house is going to go up, your 401k is going up, this is happening, that is happening. It's like if people never turned on their radio, TV, and never went on the internet, they'd never have known that fighting terrorism was going on in Iraq, Afghanistan, and wherever else. And is that proper? Is that moral? Is that ethical? Now, right now, it doesn't feel like much different than it did back then, right? And we're not doing 1/100th of what we're doing back then. So, I don't know. It's going to take something. It's not going to happen under this president. Dare I say it, if Hillary Clinton is elected, it's not going to happen after her. So if that happens, you can forget about thinking back at September 11th in the same way that you think about Pearl Harbor. Granted, we're the most powerful country in the world. And really, despite what China and Russia are doing, I think that's going to continue to be that way. And I've always made the point, if Russia or China had our military, they would have taken over the rest of the world. And we were just like them, or we were like France or like England, they would have taken over the world by now. And that just shows, once again, the greatness of our American character. But I don't anticipate feeling about September 11th like I feel about Pearl Harbor anytime soon. Because it's going to take a lot more than... I've told you this, it comes up once in a while. If we want to get to where we want to go in the United States, whatever your vision is as a conservative about the way the United States should be, it's going to get worse before it gets better. That's just the way it is. To sort this all out between big government and terrorism and illegal immigration and environmentalist kooks and all of this, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Because these things are not just going to sort themselves out. Just like World War II didn't sort itself out. It got a lot worse in the United States before it got better because they actually confronted the enemy. For us, it didn't really get that much worse in the United States after September 11th. In fact, it got much better if you lived here. And maybe that was part of the problem. Maybe things needed to get worse after September 11th. People needed to sacrifice. People needed to see their finances go down as we fought terrorism all over the world. Because then they'd say, let's get this done as fast as possible, and everything can come back to normal. It's not what happened. And until then, September 11th is going to continue to be a big, bad, red check mark on American history and how we have handled it since. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
The voice of American conservatism. WRS Digital, Red State Talk Radio.
And we're back at the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. Let's move on. Of course, still involving terror and terrorism and terrorists, but I just felt like I needed to talk a little bit about Pearl Harbor today. I'm not even sure how many people even remembered that December 7th is Pearl Harbor. And that's just, it just kind of vanishes away. We kind of think about it, and we do think about it. Well, yeah, we sorted that all right. We took it to the enemy, but maybe that's the reason it's not on a lot of people's minds anymore. Because we fixed it. Well, we haven't fixed September 11th yet. Have not fixed it. And as long as that is the case, this date, September 11th, is going that day every year, 2016, 17, 18, 2020, 2050, 2100, it's always going to stick out until we fix it. Then it'll stick out, but our attitude will change. And then that day will soften a little bit. Just like after all these years, Pearl Harbor has softened a little bit. Yes, it hurts. All the people died, the men who died. It's just unprovoked attack, on and on and on. But there is some solace that we did the right thing and took care of the enemy. We haven't done that with September 11th yet. And that's why it still has that really, really bitter taste in our mouth. Regarding Barack Obama's speech last night, I'm not going to go into the details of it because by this time you're hearing this show, most people have done that. However, what occurs to me is that, here's what I think is going on. I've told you, there's no more that I can say about Barack Obama and his attitude toward terrorism. I will add this, though, that I'm sure that there is a part of him who, when he got into office, we know that he didn't want to be in Iraq. He thought that Afghanistan was the good war, but he wasn't too thrilled about that either. And I think he thought, you know what, I'm going to do all these domestic programs. Obamacare is going to go, Democrats in the Congress are going to work with me to start Obamacare. We're going to nationalize medicine. We're going to do this. We're going to have all these very liberal programs that we're going to blow up the deficit and the national debt. And when all those work, people will forget about terrorism. And even if something does happen, I'll have all this goodwill built up that if a couple things happen here and there, I'll be able to slide. I'm telling you, because that's what all Democrats think. That's why they don't take enemies elsewhere very seriously. They do all these domestic programs and helping out the poor and spending other people's money because they know down deep they don't want to fight any wars. They don't want to go anywhere. So they build up insurance. And I was thinking about this yesterday. And the real issue is this. I mean, to put it in another terms, outside of politics, Barack Obama is that guy who promises some girl, he meets some girl, I'm going to give you everything, honey. I'm going to buy you a Rolls. I'm going to give you a big house. I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to do that for you. And it's not that he's necessarily lying. Of course, a lot of guys that say that to women are lying. It's not that he's necessarily lying. But the issue is this. Even with guys like that, even in situations like that, even in that, if you want to put it in the 1% category of people in the United States, perhaps even more exclusive than 1% if you're going to be talking about that. At some point, women just want the guy to take out the trash. At some point, yes, the romance is great, and the trips are great, and everything, but at some point, how about just cut the lawn? You want to make me happy? Just cut the lawn. Another Rolls is not going to hide the fact that the grass out in the front yard is a foot high, and that the garbage is piling up in our very expensive garage where our Ferraris sit. Barack Obama, though, is the type of guy that thinks he can forget about the essentials, like protecting the United States, just because he's flowered the United States with all of this other stuff. By the way, this is the exact problem I have with Donald Trump. I've told you that I think that Donald Trump and Barack Obama come out of very similar molds. Donald Trump is another guy who promises the world. I'm going to build a mile-high fence, which may or may not be true. Who knows? I'm going to do this, and what did he say just recently? I'm going to fight this war on terror like nothing. I'm going to bomb them like you never seen, like nothing you've ever seen. Doesn't that kind of just sound, to you women out there, doesn't that sound kind of like that guy that comes up to you and says, I'm just going to make the greatest love to you. I'm going to give you we're going to have the most beautiful children. Everything's going to be perfect. We're going to live in a big house and big cars. You know why Donald Trump talks that way? Because that's the only way he can get women in his life. Because no average guy with hair like that would be able to pick up any quality woman the way he looks. So he has to do that. So his attitude towards politics is the same thing. I'm going to do everything to the greatest. Well, you know what, Donald? How about you show that you can stay in business? You know? How about that first? Let's just see if you can do the essentials first, and then we'll talk about you being the greatest president in the universe. See, this is what gets me suspicious about all politicians when they start making promises about everything. Because we know in our daily lives, you know what? There are these essentials. There may not be a lot of them, but we know we got to cover them. And when somebody doesn't want to talk about that or overtly talks about it, it gets me suspicious. Barack Obama is the guy that lays all these great lines on women. But when that woman is stuck out on the highway with a flat tire on a Ferrari and he's watching the football game, you know what he says? You know what, honey? Wait till I let this game finish and then I'll come change that tire for you. That's who he is. And that's the kind of speech that you saw last night. To me, he looks tired. And as Jim Garrett at National Review, I think captured this very, very well, and I congratulate him on it. He's disgusted with the American people. He's more disgusted by us than he is by the terrorists. He's disgusted by us because we can't see how great he thinks he is. Did you not get that feeling from his speech? And it's true. And in a lot of ways, that's how it usually goes in relationships that start out the way I'm talking as well. Where all these big promises, grandiose promises are made. And then when the woman says, you know what, honey, I'd prefer if you just took out the garbage every Tuesday night and mowed the grass, and, cut the shrubs and everything. And then he starts looking at her as, all that Middle East stuff, I thought you were my queen. We're too good for that stuff. Well, but she's thinking, you know what? I just want a neat house. You know? Is that too much to ask? To him it is. Because frankly, buying a Ferrari, if you can afford it, is easier than cutting the shrubs. And frankly, propping up and getting past Obamacare is easier than really, really fighting terrorism, even though protection of the United States is just about supposed to be number one on the president's list. But that's the things about life, right? The essentials are usually difficult. Right? Going to work, paying your bills. Those are the difficult things. Being able to afford a Ferrari is not one of the difficult things. Getting the money to buy it might be difficult. But surely the purchasing of it is not difficult. But that's who Barack Obama is. And he's disgusted. Jim Garrity's right. He's disgusted by us. He's frustrated after almost 7 years that we haven't listened to him and changed our minds to what he thinks the attitude should be toward terrorism. He can't believe that we don't have a more, negative attitude toward gun ownership. On and on and on. Whereas I would say, you know what, Barack Obama? You know why you haven't been successful as you wanted in these other things that you've wanted? Is because you've never argued with another person in your life. You've never had any true confrontations, any obstacles in your life. You've been given everything. So you don't know how to make an argument for your side. All you can do is dismiss the other side. The problem is you can't dismiss terrorists. You might be able to dismiss the Republican Party. You might be able to dismiss conservatives and ignore us for the next year. But you know what? You can't ignore those terrorists. They function on a little bit of a different level than you do. They see your dismissiveness as a reason to even strike harder. It gives them strength. But dismissiveness is all you have now. On top of that, Barack Obama doesn't realize that your average American doesn't like to be treated like a child and lectured to. Now, some Democrats don't mind being lectured to as long as they're going to get their government check. But still, at least a majority of Americans, even including quite a few Democrats, don't like being lectured to. That's also the problem that he has. He can't speak to the American people in a way that is persuasive because, first of all, he's not doing it, and because he just dislikes us anyway. That's his attitude toward other Democrats, not wanting to help them in their re-elections, not giving money to them. And the funny thing is, it was us conservatives years ago who tried to tell Democrats, you get this guy elected, good luck. It's going to hurt the United States. But on top of that, you Democrats, you other Democrats, are going to pay for it. You're going to lose your seats. He's going to tick off a lot of people. He's not going to want to help you. He is not Bill Clinton, who is more than happy to prop up a Democrat here and throw a couple bucks here and throw a couple bucks there. Now, of course, with the Clintons, it always comes with the strings attached. But still, they were willing to help. Not Barack Obama. But he really thought that he had built up enough will over this first 6 years with talking about climate change and Obamacare and helping out illegals and everything. And in the end, you know what the American people want? They want to be able to go to work and not worry about terrorists who are obviously terrorists. Now, granted, these people, they were pretty good undercover, as we've seen to this point. I realize now we're going to look back at it and say, well, should have seen this and should have seen that. But when people were working with Saeed Farouk and can't tell anything, I don't know what to tell you. But people just want to be assured that the federal government is behind them if the average citizen has to take his or her own personal weapon to kill these idiots if something happens. Unfortunately, the federal government doesn't believe in that. And that's, once again, going back to the essentials, to the basics. And I think that with that, at least at this point in the United States, that still means something. That a majority of Americans are still connected to that. They understand that they don't have the Secret Service, and they don't want to ride around in a tank looking like a Cadillac. Right? They don't live in a house with bulletproof windows and guys standing on the roof with missiles and all the other things and bunkers in the basement. You know, they're out there figuratively naked. And the guy who is in that tank, who is in that house, who gets to fly on a private plane is telling the rest of us, you know what? These guys shouldn't have those weapons. It's crazy. It's crazy. So, it's dangerous times. Dangerous, dangerous times. A lot of it brought on by Barack Obama at 80% to 85% of it, and 15% brought on by things that happened before he was president and some of Americans' attitudes toward government since he became president, in that thinking that all I need is my check. And some of those people forgetting about the basics. I mean, a country that can't handle terrorism shouldn't be thinking about trying to overhaul its healthcare system with government involvement. If the private sector, the health sector, thinks, you know what, we need to do a better job, we need to get a little bit more competitive or something, get that. They can do that on their own. They want to have more patients, lower costs, more supply, higher demand, lower prices, whatever it takes. Let them go do it. Open up the floodgates, lower the regulation, all that stuff. Government can stay out of it. But a government that has all the power in the world to fight a bunch of gangs is essentially what they are. Just one big gang. Then it thinks it can handle a health system. You know, a government that is built to fight the enemy with aircraft carriers and submarines and machine guns and people who voluntarily want to do it. And the federal government can't do it, but it thinks it can handle a healthcare system. Like I said, though, Barack Obama thought he had all this goodwill built up. He thought he'd be able to get through a couple of these incidents. And he was wrong. He was wrong. People still default to their instincts, and that is survival. And that may be in the end, and survival meaning not just where their government check is, but just getting through the day without getting shot. As long as that's the case, we as conservatives are going to be on very solid ground in our belief that all people, legal citizens, no felonies, take the classes, can shoot the guns, have no mental issues, should have guns. And that is millions and millions and millions of Americans. And as far as protecting against terrorism in the United States, I guess it looks like we're going to have to be the first defense. That's just the way it's going to have to be. Now, there's another part to this, and this just shows you how, in the 5 minutes that I have left, how crazy this is. And one of the problems that we have, a huge problem that we have, is that here we have like the father of Saeed Farouk, and his dad's name is also Saeed Farouk. I don't know, do they do that Saeed Farouk Sr., Saeed Farouk Jr. thing in Muslim or Middle Eastern cultures. I don't know. But his dad, obviously not a kook like his son, but even his dad is kind of a kook. And he said his son was obsessing over Israel, talking about it, upset that it existed. And so his dad was trying to talk some sense to him and to his son. Now, his dad didn't take the approach that, well, Israel, we know that they're Jews and we're Muslims and we don't like them and everything, but maybe we need to do this a different way. And, there's been peace between Israel and Egypt, and that's been really good for Muslim culture. And look at Israel kind of working with the Saudis to fight the Iranians and doing the, there's a lot of good things that have come, even though I know we're supposed to hate them. But look at this stuff over there. That was not and this father is supposed to be considered a somewhat moderate Muslim. You know what he told his son instead to kind of calm his son's attitude toward Israel? Don't worry, son. Israel isn't even going to exist in a couple years. Now, I got to tell you, obviously, if his dad is willing to tell that to, I guess it was an Italian newspaper, if he's willing to say that to an Italian newspaper, he must believe it. Now, I follow world events pretty well. Is there something going on? Because his dad told, Sayyid Farouk Sr. told Syed Jr. that, in a couple years, those Jews, they're all going to be sent back to the Ukraine. I keep saying Ukraine. Sent back to Ukraine. The Russians, the Turks, the United States, they're going to ship all those Jews back to Ukraine, and Israel won't exist anymore. Is that in anybody's plans? Why does that father think that? Where does that come from? I'm guessing it comes from some radical Islam publication, website that I can't read because probably it's in a different language. I don't even know. I've never heard that said anywhere, but that was what his dad was telling Said Jr. Now, if that's the case, if this is the kind of propaganda that is being sold in the Middle East regarding Israel, it's no wonder those people are frustrated. They're being told, well, just don't worry, in a couple years, Israel won't be here. A couple more years, it won't be here. So those couple years pass, Israel's still here. Well, don't worry, a couple more years. It's no wonder that all this frustration gets built up. On top of the hate that they already have for them. So even your moderate Muslims are kooks. If that's what they believe. Is it just a coincidence his dad says that and is like that? And so you hear something like that and you think, yep, man, we are not even close. We are not even close to getting rid of this. We have so much work to do that you can pick a couple places to start, but after that, it's hard to see which way to go. So his son was angry about Israel, and his dad's telling him, don't worry, to calm his son down, to pacify him. Israel, it just isn't going to be here anymore, so don't worry about it. I don't know. Is that what most Muslims think? Is that what they're buying into? Because that's news to me. Now, if they're saying that Iran's going to get a bomb and completely wipe Israel off the map, that seems plausible to me, unfortunately. But surely not all the Jews being shipped out and sent to Ukraine. I don't even know how that would work. That's crazy talk. But they believe it. So even when you run across some moderate Muslims, this must be what's in their head as well. And it's no wonder that they continue to walk around with all this hate, because they got a bunch of lies in their heads. On top of them giving their radical Muslim friends a break. But I got to go. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio, and I will talk to you again very soon.